Well, hello everyone. I wanted to put together a lecture over this chapter on moral development. And to be quite honest with you, I would consider this sort of a brief overview, considering how long some of these get. Mostly looking at some of the theories and the criticisms of the theories and things of that sort, and just get your take on things, or share with you my take on things, excuse me, of how some of the different theories work and basically what they try to accomplish. Now, keep in mind, when we talk of moral development, we're not talking about any religious beliefs. We're talking mostly about how a child, in this case, determines right from wrong. That is what we're looking at, an understanding of right from wrong. So let's start talking about some of the theories, the theorists and their theories. Okay. Well, one of the first we're going to talk about is someone we've covered before, and that is Jean Piaget. Piaget, in all of his studies with children, actually did some work on basically moral development. All right. He believed that when it comes to moral development, a lot of moral development happens, if you remember his four stages, okay, of cognitive development. First was the sensory motor, the second, pre-operational, the third, concrete operational, and fourth was formal operations. Jean Piaget believed that when it comes to determining right from wrong, children tend to learn this during what is called the pre-operational stage, and then they further their knowledge along the concrete operational stage. Now, the way that Piaget would gauge a person's level of moral development is that he would tell a story. And this was his approach to gauging moral development. He would tell a story, sort of a slight moral dilemma, and see how the child responds to it. Now, his original story was a story of two boys. It was a fictitious story of Augustus and Julian. They're not exactly names we throw around a lot anymore, but hey, they were names that meant a lot to Piaget. His original story is sort of hard to explain today because when it comes to writing and the use of ink pens, we don't tend to dip our pens in an ink pot like maybe they did, some time ago. So I'm going to give you the updated storyline and let you turn around and see how this works out. Augustus and Julian are brothers. Here's his story. And one day, Augustus was helping his mom with dinner. She was making spaghetti and meatballs and had a lot of the spaghetti sauce and meatballs in a big pot. And Augustus decided to help his mother by turning around and taking the pot and putting it on the dinner table. But in the process of doing so and helping her, he made a very big mess. All right. He dropped the pot and he made a very big mess. All right. His brother Julian was also at the dinner table and he was playing with his food, something he was not supposed to do. All right. He was not supposed to do, but he probably was twirling his spaghetti on a fork and he got spaghetti just a little bit, just a very small portion of it on the table and on his shirt and things like that. So, this is a story of Augustus and Julian. Augustus, who was helping his mother, done it before, helping her by putting a pot of spaghetti sauce on the table, but ended up dropping it on the floor and making a very big mess. And Julian, his brother, who was playing with his food, his spaghetti and spaghetti sauce when he's not supposed to, and made a little mess. Okay? After telling this story, Piaget would ask children, because he usually told this story one at a time, not necessarily to groups, who did who is in more trouble? Who did the greater evil? Who's going to get it? Based on a child's answer, he could determine their level of moral development. Now, the first level is what is called the morality of constraint stage. According to Piaget, most children in the pre-operational stage, ages 2 to 7, tend to be in this morality of constraint stage. Children at this age tend to see things as right or wrong, good or bad. There really is no gray area. It's sort of black or white. And if you ask a child who is in the morality of constraint stage, who is in more trouble, Augustus or Julian? Piaget found that most children would say that Augustus is in more trouble. And one of the things you always ask when you tell about this moral dilemma, you ask who's in more trouble and then you ask why. All right, that's always a big one. Why? Why are they in more trouble? And most children in a morality of constraint stage will tell you that Augustus is in more trouble because he made a bigger mess. All right, whereas Julian made a very small mess. In this case, it's the size of the damage done that determines who's going to be in the greatest amount of trouble. Piaget also found that people would sometimes be in what was called a morality of cooperation stage. Piaget found that most of these people were usually in the concrete operational mindset, somewhere between ages 7 to 12 or beyond. All right. People in a morality of cooperation stage tend to see things as right or wrong, good or bad, but they also understand there can be some gray area. So it's not as clear cut as people in a morality of constraint stage might think. Individuals in a morality of cooperation stage also will take into consideration intent. What is a person's intent? What is their intention? So you turn around and tell the story of Augustus and Julian to someone in the concrete operational stage who's showing what's called a morality of cooperation. And they may turn around and say that Julian is in more trouble. And you might argue with them or question them and say, but Augustus made a bigger mess than Julian. How can Julian be in more trouble? And it boils down to intent. Augustus was doing something designed to help. He was trying to help. Julian, on the other hand, was doing something he shouldn't have done. He was playing with his food and he knew better. So one could argue that even though Julian made a much smaller mess, he's actually in more trouble, all because of the element of intent, right? This is Piaget's theory, and it's really only a two-stage theory. If you've ever turned around, I'll give you an example, and maybe you've gone through this too. As you're growing up, if you ever had a time where you were at the dinner table, and this did happen to me, where in the process of being at the dinner table, I turned around one time when I was very young. I don't remember how old, probably second or third grade, so probably 6 or 7 or 8 years old. And I spilled my water glass on the table. Okay. My father always sat at the other end of the table, and quite frankly, there were times he intimidated me when I was that young. So I spilled the water across the table, and it was completely, utterly an accident. Well, the tablecloth got wet. We had to turn around and pick things off the table while Mom got a towel to dry everything off. And I really expected to be in an awful lot of trouble because I made a big mess. But in the end, I didn't get in as much trouble as I thought I would. And a lot of that was because of the fact that, well, to be honest with you, I was, just simply moving one dish from one person to another, trying to hand something to my mom, I believe it was, and I knocked over the glass in the process. My old mindset was I was in a lot of trouble because of the extent of the damage. But I actually realized later that the reason I wasn't in a lot of trouble was because it was truly my intention was an accident. I wasn't playing around or horsing around. So that's sort of an example of how this works. All right. Okay, that's enough for Piaget's theory. I do have another theory, and this one takes a little while. So I think I'm going to cut these into two different sections. Keep up the great work.